Hey, welcome to the show. This is a weekly jargon. I am Jose Rodriguez.
And Rohi Zachariah.
And today, Rohi, we're talking about the essence of water, how important it is for us here in California. More importantly, how important is it for us here in the city, right?
Yeah.
So, when you think about water, I mean, we look at it here, especially as Californians, that it's an abundance, that we have this infinite amount of water. How do you see water play out here in our community? I mean, do you ever think about the fact that it potentially can run out, or we could be facing a shortage?
Yeah, I would say honestly, it's something that's always in the back of my mind. I mean, as somebody that, we have fruit trees and we have obviously the stuff that we grow in the backyard. I've been trying to be mindful of our water usage. I will say that's one of the arguments back and forth. My dad is a big lawn guy. He likes his big green grass, and when we got our new house, that was one of the things I fought back a little bit and said, like, I don't really want a big yard. I don't want a lot of grass because to me, it's kind of a waste of water. So kind of being mindful of what our water goes towards is always something that I try to keep in consideration. So.
Great. Well, just to throw some numbers out there as far as when we talk about water and the use of water, I know they use certain metrics with water. And an acre foot of water represents a football field that is filled up with either 2 feet, a foot of water deep, right? So you think about an acre foot, and then you look at that and you say, wow, that's quite a bit of water there, right? So when we talk about the city of Madera, how much of that water are we consuming here in the city, right? And how much of that water is being consumed in our surrounding community? And then you go even further, how much water is being consumed in the valley, the state, and how much water do we really have to replenish that, right?
Yeah.
Because typically the way water is brought, especially surface water, that's through the snowmelt. So we have these snowpacks that are out there. Once they thaw out, water starts running down these rivers, all these channels, and they collect them either in dams or they let them run out, and then they utilize the aqueducts or the state water system to be able to deliver them but here in Madera, would you ever think that we would ever be in a position to run out of water?
I will say honestly, yeah. I mean, I think especially in recent years with some of the knowledge that I've gained, I will say that there's always a fear of turning that tap on and getting nothing, and mostly just because, I mean, again, it's not an infinite resource. It does come from somewhere, and that table is, it's been, going down every year. It's not like we've had a year where we said, hey, we're really getting some major gains here. It's always a scare of, well, it's going lower again. It's going lower again. So
yeah, and that's been the trend. And I think we saw a big hit when the 2014-15 drought took place, because even the city of Madera took measures to conserve water. I think it was a mandate from then Governor Jerry Brown, I believe,
yeah,
was requesting that all cities hunker down on their water consumption, only because we were facing some issues with water delivery. Now, there is an argument, right? And the argument is, the snowpack delivers enough water to be able to supply California and its uses twofold. But there's also that environmental part of it that, hey, that water also is needed for runoff to allow native species, whether it's a salmon, delta smelt, or what have you, and not destroy the ecosystem. And the arguments that you see, especially if you're traveling down the 99 in the San Joaquin Valley, that is highly dependent on water, is stop running the water to the ocean.
yeah.
And I think the fact that there's millions of acre feet that are runoff to the ocean, then it makes people here in the valley feel like, well, what's going on? I mean, why are we not getting a bigger share of that runoff to be able to utilize it for, again, farming use, residential, although we're small, But your thoughts on that, Rohi? Do you think that we have, I mean, first of all, and this isn't asking you
Yeah.
and putting you on the spot, but I'm asking you based on the knowledge that we have so far in water, do you feel that we have sufficient water to cater to all uses that we have here in California? That's ag, urban,
Yeah,
industrial.
definitely. I mean, I think one of the crazy ideas that always comes to my mind living by the Fresno River, for instance, is, you know, I know we can't build dams because obviously the environmental impacts are, you know, it's challenging and it's expensive. But when you look at something like the Fresno River that will occasionally obviously have water, and they can always, that means they can divert water through at any time. If they were to block it at a certain point and allow that water just to percolate in that river, you would have already a natural dam. You know, so the method or the means to trap water is kind of there. And that frustration always comes about because you hear constantly where the snowmelt comes, the lakes fill up, and then, but well, by the way, we had to lower the water because we don't want to have too much water, right? There's always this scare of like, well, the water can go too high in these lakes, so we need to make sure that we purge it in preparation for the snowmelt. And then what happens? The snowmelt happens, and we didn't have enough water.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah.
that's where when you say, is there enough, it always feels like there is enough, but we kind of are wasteful with it, or whatever the mechanism in the back end that says, hey, let's kind of get rid of it real quick just in case there's flooding. Well, where are we getting rid of it to? Where is there somewhere else we can store it? And that's why I said, like, the Fresno River is always one of those in the back of my mind saying, well, yeah, fine, divert it there. Let that riverway just maybe fill up, let it percolate for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and then just let it go.
And you know what was interesting? I had an opportunity to meet with the MID executive director, Mr. Thomas Gretche, and I wanted to thank him personally for allowing me to kind of get an insight of how the Madera Irrigation District works, you know, and gave me some history, some context, and some numbers, right, that certainly opened my eyes. They strictly operate on surface water, right? Everything that they do is they deliver surface water within their district through their all these farm and ag places that require water. They deliver the surface water there through contracts or what have you. But they too get their water from a source, which is the Friant Dam. And there's some history on that. Obviously, I'd like to bring Mr. Gretche here, hopefully here soon, so that we can have him and ask him some questions and really dive deep into how water allocations are, and he can kind of explain and to let us know that. But what was fascinating to me, Rohi, is that outside of the irrigation district, obviously you have a lot of land. And these lands are considered areas where they may be wide areas where no surface water is deliverable. So then they're strictly groundwater dependent. The city of Madera, 100% groundwater dependent. Now, the question that I've always asked as a resident here and now as a council member is, why can't we have surface water? What is the problem with us capturing some of that snow melt and utilizing that for fresh drinking water, right? I mean, you would think that the freshest water is the water that comes from the snow, right? You still have to treat it,
Sure, yeah.
but that requires a surface water treatment plant. And I believe our neighbors to the south, Fresno, have one, and I don't know what the cost was, but I'm told that it was in the millions, right? And it's something that obviously, if we wanted to build that infrastructure, we'd have to pass that on to your ratepayers. Now, that may, we'd have to see how long would that take for us to see the savings in that and building these huge projects to be able to deliver water in the future.
Yeah.
But if we're continuously depending on the groundwater and we're not doing what you said, is we're not capturing the water because we don't have the capacity to do it with basins, reservoirs, what have you, or the rivers are not being filled and we're not recharging our groundwater. Therefore, we have to dig deeper and compete with the surrounding agriculture folks that also depend on groundwater.
Yeah.
But that's a good point, is how much of that runoff can we capture, and what would be the fight that we'd be up against with the runoff? Because remember, there was a time where the San Joaquin River was the habitat for a lot of salmon, for a lot of fish, trout that swim upstream, salmon being the biggest one, right? And I've seen documentaries where they'll account for, there was a time where we used to just walk out there and the salmon as big as this, pictures of them, and obviously these were great times.
Yeah.
But after the state took over its water system, then obviously they had to cut certain segments of the river so that they can deliver water more effectively.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess on the micro scale, this is where, again, because I'm trying to be really conscious about our water usage. Around our house, when we did our rain gutters, we implemented the rain barrels. And I will say that for our house, I mean, it doesn't take but 1 or 2 rainy days to fill up and get probably close to almost 500 gallons of water, which when you go back to go to use it for your trees and stuff, I mean, they can go for quite a while. I mean, that's quite a bit of water to either water your grass or if you've got fruit trees. It's almost that you would like to see some of those, because I know there are incentives for rain barrels for the city right now, but when I looked into them, they were not enough to incentivize me to do them myself, because again, it wanted engineering plans and it required a lot of red tape to say, instead of saying, city, we have a water problem, every household should have a rain barrel, and this could somehow offset people's water usage, to water the grass or water, whatever, plants they got around the house. Because it's some of those little baby steps that you can take that it gets around some of the litigation that you're talking about. Because I know as a city, if all of a sudden we said, hey, residents, we're going to board up the Fresno River to store water, I know an agency is going to come in and say, no, that's our water, you can't have it, But at the local level, at the small level, it's my water, it's in my house, I can use it and store it as I will. So the tricky part is always you get water when you don't need it, right? The rain comes, I don't need to water my lawn at that point, so somehow I have to now store that water somewhere, maybe for a month or two, when the rains stop, to be able to use it. Otherwise, I'm watering when the ground is already wet,
But and here's a question for you. I mean, we as urban residents, I mean, we have to take certain measures. Not only because it's mandated, because at the end of the day, it's a cost because we're metered. Now you're metered, right? I mean, obviously before it was the wild, wild west of water. If you had a connection to the city, you paid the base rate for that connection. So therefore, water could flow, wash cars. But now as we start facing these issues with conservation because we're depleting the aquifer, obviously with SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, requires that if we are in a basin, and we're removing this much acre feet of water, then we should be replenishing that same amount of water so that we can be balanced at some point, right? And we have a target now of 2040, which is about 15 years away, Rohi. And I think within the 7, what they call GSAs, groundwater sustainable agencies, Madera, the city of Madera being one, the county of Madera being one, Madera Irrigation District, Madera Water District, you have Root Water District, and then you have another stone. There's like 7 of them.
Yeah.
All 7 of them have to come together to formulate this plan that we submit to the state and let them know that here's our plan for us to be balanced by 2040, and here's what we're going to implement to make sure that we're balanced by 2040. The problem is that, again, you have 7 different diverse GSAs that utilize water in different ways, right? The city, it's all residential, some industrial, but typically that's what it is. So for us, I mean, the consumption of water, it's not like we take a lot of it. The majority of water, 80% of it is probably ag, right? So then if you have these other agencies that see ag differently than we do in urban areas or water differently than we do, then for them, it's vital for them to have water. And they're going to fight to the end to make sure that they have their allocations of water to survive in their deal. But again, we all share from the same well. This is the basin. How do we all get along?
Yeah.
And make sure that we have water for the future, right? And again, not only for farming, but also for urban use. And I think that's the bigger challenge because you do have areas that are probably not regulated like the city has. The city has taken an initiative of not only putting basins alongside the Madera working with the irrigation district, we put about basins that cover about 400 acre feet of water for recharge, right? Aside from what other storm drainage basins that we have, but outside of that, what is the county, what is these other districts, what are they doing in order to meet that same demand
Yeah.
that the state is pushing on us?
And I think, I mean, looking at some of the numbers, like, for instance, you use the acre feet that, you buy a acre foot of water for $98 for an acre foot. And to me, that seems cheap. I mean, when you say how much water it is for $100, I think that's also the battle as well, is water is so cheap that it can be frivolous. It's just water. I mean, at that point, running the tap it's pennies, right? So there's not really a big incentive. And I know this has kind of come out when the rates came up for the city of Madera and the challenge of, I think it was the city of Clovis that got in trouble for increasing the rates to make people use less water, because you can't do that. But that is a challenge to say, if water is just so cheap, it's kind of, I mean, I'll leave the water running. I'll empty my pool and refill it whenever I feel like it, because it's only going to be a couple of bucks. That can be a challenge. I mean, with farmers, I think it's also the same thing, because if you were to say, like, rip out a portion of your crop and make your own basin, right? Let the water percolate there, pump it out as you feel needed, but somehow if it's taking a little bit less water from the system, it'd be beneficial. But how much is that going to cost to make a system like that, to capture that water and store it for when they need it? It's probably going to be years before they can even think about recouping any of those fees. I think any of these have to deal with, it's the simple aspect of saying, is it about saving water? Then you can't associate cost with it. If it's about giving cheap water, then that's kind of where you have to take your battle. And I think right now with the Central Valley, we need to conserve water, we need to fix our water, and whatever it costs to do that has to be the importance.
Yeah, and see, and this is the mindset that I think a lot of urban areas have really, like, we've been kind of conditioned to believe that it's you causing the majority of the water shortages. Obviously, with any residential, you're going to suck out water, right?
Sure.
But not at the rate that you do with the outside activities. Now, we need food. We
Sure.
need, farmers, and so this is an issue that we all face. It's not something like, well, let's blame ag, or let's blame this, or it's more of like, well, how do you find a solution to find balance, right? And again, I think,
but the balance, see, that's what I'm saying. The balance is understanding the cycle. So if I use 100 gallons, for instance, to water my grass, now obviously there's evaporation, but most of that water is going back into the soil, and it's feeding this system. So I'm not using 100 gallons. There's some, like I said, there's going to be some loss to that, but most of that should be coming back into the system. So I think with farming, the difficulty I've always had is, if they use 100 gallons, obviously there's evaporation and everything. Some of that goes back in, but most of the water goes to that fruit, and that fruit now leaves the area, because it's not like we consume it and that water is going back into the system here. It's going somewhere else. So there's kind of this natural draw. People don't realize that, but that little cherry, if it's got, whatever, an ounce of water in it, you've taken it from the city of Madera and now you've transported it somewhere else. So that's what's taking from our overall, like if we were in a bubble, this magic bubble, and Madera got, 10,000 whatever acre feet of rain, at some point there should be 10,000 acre feet in our system, but it's leaving with the farming industry.
That's a good example. When I was in Hawaii, especially in Maui, they had this effort in stopping people from taking sand from the beach. Because you can imagine, right? You'll do it. I mean, think about it.
Little bottle here.
Little bottle here. But after millions and millions of bottles have
Sure.
gone through, and kind of to your point, right? I mean, it happens with maybe citrus, bigger, the more, or cantaloupe or what have you. Wherever they export that to, obviously that's water leaving.
Yeah.
To your point, right? And every almond, I think it takes about a certain gallon of water to create that one almond.
Correct.
You could imagine how many almonds are in a tree. Same thing goes for beef, alfalfa. I mean, everything that you grow out here. I mean, obviously, if you want to break it down to units,
Sure.
then here's how much water it takes for you to grow this
Correct.
pound of beef,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
then one can argue, wow, and this is where you have a lot of the environmental groups talk about, hey, maybe the water isn't being utilized in the best way.
Maybe we should eat bugs.
Maybe we should eat bugs, right? But again, that's a whole separate conversation that we can
Yeah,
have. But
yeah.
to your point, yes, you're absolutely right. Kind of like what they told me when I was leaving. The reason why we don't want tourists to come and take the sand is because they're eroding. The sand's eroding
Yep.
by the minute because you're taking all this sand. You're taking it out there, and again, you look at it. I mean, how many people travel to Maui, or I mean, and everybody wants to take a bottle of sand. Before you know it, there's tons of sand is being extracted from there, and you don't see it, but it's like a little bit of grains at a time, right? So water is no different. I do believe that the urban side has been conserving. I think it showed here on some of the Department of the Water Resource Board showed how much conservation has happened since 1990 to now, right? And there's been a decrease in water usage from the urban side
Yeah.
of it, right? Especially in Madera. We were tasked to 20%. Well, we went beyond that, right? Now we offer certain incentives to add artificial turf, dry landscape, right? If you do any of that, there's some incentives. And I think on a bigger scale, that may need to happen with ag, is that you may need to say, hey, you need to fallow this land because, one, there's no access to water, and you're starting to dig deep enough where you're not hitting good water. You're maybe hitting arsenic gases or
Yeah.
what have you that are really essentially not really helping you. And I think down Avenue 12, you'll see some of these trees that are starting to face some issues there because, again, access to water. So, and this is kind of where I go with the conservation approach is, could we, and we're talking about all these little things we do here locally, but again, going back to the snowpack, and we'll get these arguments back and forth from environmental groups and then from the ag groups. Do we have enough water, especially on the wet years, to say, let's not run off that much water there. Let's bring it back and start more capacity storage, right? We can store more water and essentially recharge these basins, because one of the things that I've learned going through these water, this fellowship that I'm doing, is that you also have to be careful that you don't shut the valve off on the runoff, because then you have what they call seawater intrusion, and that'll come back to the delta. Obviously, you have salinity now in a lot of these areas that may destroy certain crops, species, ecosystems, and what have you. So my understanding is that the delta in San Francisco, especially the way it's like this, a big, large mouth where it collects the San Joaquin and the Sacramento River, they're all pushing down this area, creating this pressure to push out all the seawater. So that it's a balance of that. But how much of that water do you need to keep that intrusion from coming in, right? There's a balance there too. But again, here in the valley, we argue down the 99, allow more water. Don't throw the water to the ocean, and you'll see that all in 99. You'll see that Newsom. You're running our water. I could see that policies that we've created at the state have really hampered the ability for some of these ag operations to make it happen. And you know, we got to say that to some extent we all depend on ag. Smart ag. Now there's some ag that frankly I just say, well, that's way out there in areas that probably aren't able to get groundwater, but they're still extracting it at an alarming rate.
Yeah.
And that to me may be like the institutional investors saying, well, we don't live here, but we bought this land, so no different than those folks that own these springs where they extract all this natural water, but yet the residents can't have a decent amount of potable water.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's hard because it's the David and Goliath, where our influence is going to be at the city level, and we can only get city residents to go down so far. But if obviously the farmers using the 80%, that would be the more effective people to go after. But I would argue that, again, in my experience with the water issues and like the programs that you're talking about for the city, it feels like the artificial turf thing especially, some of our neighbors got it, and when looking at how much it costs them to put in that artificial turf, I thought maybe it would be a couple $1,000s for a yard, and it was like almost, I think, $20,000 or $30,000 for their front and backyard. And when looking at how much water costs and how much even my gardener costs, I'm thinking going like, that's like maybe 10 years before I'm even going to see a recoup on that money at best.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like the program is doing what it needs to do. It should be, here's the amount of money we have. It's 100% funded to get you your artificial turf. Not everybody's going to get it this year, but if we got 5 houses that got paid for and got artificial turf, the next year there's going to be 5 more. And the next year there's going to be 5 more. And I think you would see more adoption of things like artificial turf, where right now, I think they got a few $1,000s, but it didn't make any sense compared to the overall cost.
No, and you're right, and that's probably what holds people back. Obviously, if you're more on the upper scale of affluent families that have possibly more money, then you may do it too because of the aesthetics of it,
Sure.
right?
It looks nice.
Looks nice,
we do
right?
say it looks nice.
But like you said, how much is it going? When am I going to recoup that or see that savings for that additional $5,000 that I added on top of the 3 that I got back, right? So you start breaking down the amount of water usage. Well, my bill is no different than it was before. I mean, quite frankly.
I don't. It's not going to be that much water.
And as rates continue to escalate, then at the end of the day, it may take me many years to break even, if any. I may never break even. But again, like you said,
but is that the goal? See, that's what I'm saying. Is that the goal, or is the goal for the city to say, we have a goal of 50% of the households in 10 years have artificial grass? Like, is that the goal?
Yeah, and some of these bigger, like MID, I think I understand, is that you can do that where you say, well, I'll pay you for not watering this section of the ground, right?
Sure.
Obviously, it comes with the price, right? You start looking at like, well, now you don't have grass, it captures this carbon dioxide, creates oxygen, stuff like that. I mean, we don't want to be to a point where we're almost a desert, right? Trees are important for us, but because that's what kind of filters out a lot of the congestion, emissions, and what have you. This is what sucks up carbon and holds it in place so that we have somewhat of clean air. Although we have issues also with not only with our groundwater basin, but also our air basin, and that's something that we can talk about a little later.
Sure.
But we just wanted to kind of not necessarily dive deep into it today.
Yeah.
But we want to start the conversation, and maybe a series of conversations with water, and we can bring in different folks. I'm going to try to see if I can get someone from MID. Hopefully, it's Mr. Gretche. He'd agree to come in here, and maybe we can ask a couple of more in-depth questions that he may more apt to explain.
Sure.
Because I think it's important for us to really understand our water here in not only our city. It's hard enough to understand it outside, but if you don't know what you're paying for here and you don't understand how your water is delivered, then it's a shame because you're just forking the bill. And that's true. I mean, to some extent, I don't think any resident really wants to know all the details. I just want to know that I have water when I bathe. I want to know I have water when I cook. And I want to know that I have water when I'm
which I know
watering.
California was, and I don't know how far it is along in this path, but I know at some point they had talked about making some kind of pipeline to another state that is flush with water and bringing that water from them, almost like the oil pipelines. But
to be the Alaskan state, that would be the other issue, because right now with the Colorado Compact, they have a Colorado River Compact where California, I think, is the biggest consumer of that river. And that's because way back, and I'm talking maybe more than 100 years, they made a deal where they were going to build some of the infrastructure needed or divert that water source into California, which feeds into Southern California. But again, look at Friant. We have our Friant Dam there. When the United States Bureau of Reclamations took on that, they said, okay, we're going to build this dam because we have the money to do it. And because they bought that from MID, they gave MID a water right, or at least a channel, a canal to be able to divert water to its agriculture uses. And then they have the other Bryan Authority that delivers it over to Kern and Bakersfield and all that area that may deliver water out there. But again, coming from one source up there. And they have these hydroelectric things where they generate obviously some money to offset the cost of delivering water. But all that is fascinating to me. I mean, the way we have water today and rights of how you acquired water back then, that's something that I think it's important for us to know. And again, hopefully this is a series that we do, Rohi, and we bring in some folks here that understand water.
Yeah.
We'll ask our MID director. If not, we'll bring in maybe an engineer, and then we'll bring someone from the county and someone from the state that hopefully gives us a little bit of details
There
on
you
how
go.
that is. But
Yeah.
it's always fun to talk about water up until you don't have it.
Yeah.
Then you know that resource is so precious that we're willing to die for it. You know, in many cases, that's what happens. But just some fun facts here. This is again from the Department of Water Resource Board. It does show that in California, the folks since the 1990s, it looks here, residential use accounts for about 10%, and that's about 8 to 9 million acre feet per year. And per capita use has declined significantly from 231 gallons a day in 1990 to 146 gallons a day in 2015. So again, that's thanks to the conservation efforts that we've done, right? I mean, that was imposed on us. We have to do this.
Yeah.
And again, now that we're being metered, that kind of conditioned us to believe that, hey, if I use more water, I'm going to pay for more,
Correct.
right? So you have
Yeah.
to be very conservative when you do that. But overall, talking about that runoff that I was talking about earlier, it looks like California alone, the runoff, we're able to capture from that runoff maybe 10 or 20 million acre feet. We're able to capture like 3.5 acre feet. And that's from the river flow that goes into the ocean, all that water that goes into the ocean. Again, this is surface water flow from snowpacks. These numbers are not necessarily from me. I'll put a link there so you can see where I'm getting this information. If something is wrong, feel free to correct us. But that's kind of what we do. We provide some information, we'll provide the links, but mainly it's our opinions, right,
Yeah.
Rohi? If we're wrong, oh well. Yeah, correct us. So that's just a visual, kind of get you to kind of understand how much water. And again, we talked about what an acre foot is. That's a football field filled up about a foot
Yeah.
of water. So that's how much
Okay.
water. Imagine, Rohi, what can you do with that kind of water? I mean, that'll fill up a pool or two, right? I don't
Sure.
know how many Olympic pools you'll be able to fill up with that, or how much it takes to fill up a pool.
Yeah, I mean, I would just hate to get to the point where the city starts asking residents to take a shower every other day, and so because we need to conserve.
If we're going at this alarming rate, Rohi, and although we have all these efforts, on paper, we may be able to show that we're somewhat balanced, especially
Sure.
the efforts that the city does, right?
Yeah.
But like I said, there's a well that we all share, right? The city does its part. These other agencies may do their part, but what about the other players in there? I mean,
Yeah.
the goal is for all of us to come together and acknowledge that, hey, we have to keep this table of water at this level every year. And in dry years, let's shrink it down because we need it, but let's do efforts in bringing that back. And if we're creating these deficits on the budget that we have for water, then it doesn't matter what we do, doesn't matter what MID does, the deficit is still there. We're going lower and lower and lower. And essentially, for us as residents, that means you have to drill bigger industrial wells deeper. And every well right now, Rohi, for industrial municipal wells, you're looking about $2 million. And that's today's cost. Imagine in 10 years, that could be $4 million, right? So every one of those $1 million is passed on to you, me, and every other resident that's a ratepayer here. So something to consider. So I think as residents, it's important to know that. And again, as your council members, I mean, we're not throwing this out here as a town hall,
Yeah.
but we're essentially doing what we call a virtual town hall. And we want to make sure that you're aware. If there's any questions, let us know. If you'd like to see anyone come into our show and talk about water, please hit us up. Rohi, you know where you can find them, Sachs Guns, and you can always find me here at my office here at Mason McDuffie. So with that, Rohi, I don't know if you want to end up with anything else.
No, we're good.
I think we beat up on water for as much as we can. We look forward to having someone here next week that can help us and interpret water a little bit better. Again, Rohi, thank you. Welcome, and